Stop scrolling right now, because what you are about to hear is the single most explosive royal scandal to erupt from inside the palace walls in decades, and almost nobody is telling you the full story. A member of the royal inner circle allegedly smuggled an entire film crew into the late Queen's most sacred private retreat, pocketed hundreds of thousands of pounds in the process, and then, when Princess Anne caught him red-handed, the cover-up that followed tore the royal family apart from the inside. And you, yes you, are about to find out exactly how it happened, who tried to bury it, and why the woman they call the hardest working royal in Britain refused to let anyone walk away clean. Take a breath, because this is the kind of story the palace press office would pay a fortune to keep out of your ears. Balmoral, forged documents. Secret production trucks rolling through the Scottish Highlands in the pitch black of early morning. A queen consort allegedly pulling strings to protect her own flesh and blood. A king caught between his wife and his sister, paralyzed, unable to choose. And at the center of it all, a food critic with a famous last name, a streaming deal in his pocket, and a scheme so audacious that even seasoned royal watchers could not believe what they were reading. Here is the question I want you to sit with as we go. How does someone who is not even a blood member of the royal family end up believing he can rent out the late Queen's favorite home like it belongs to him? Keep that question in your head, because the answer, when it comes, is going to shock you. And there is a revelation near the end that I promise you is going to make your jaw hit the floor. Let me set the scene for you, the way it actually unfolded on that cold Scottish morning. Picture Balmoral Castle, granite walls rising out of the Highland mist. 50,000 acres of private royal estate, the same ground where Queen Elizabeth II spent every summer of her long reign, the same drawing room where she took her final photograph just 2 days before her death. This is not a hotel. This is not a film set. This is, for the royal family, something close to sacred ground. And on this particular morning, it was supposed to be closed, locked, silent, reserved entirely for private royal use. Except it was not silent at all. Estate staff began noticing something strange before the sun even rose. Trucks, big ones, catering vans, lighting rigs, cables being unspooled across gravel paths that usually only see the boots of gamekeepers and the paws of the royal corgis, whispered radio chatter, production assistants in black fleece jackets carrying clipboards through corridors that tourists are not even allowed to photograph from the outside. And presiding over the entire operation, on paper at least, one name, Tom Parker Bowles, the food critic, son of Queen Camilla, the stepson of the king himself. Here is where it gets absolutely insane, and I want you to pay very close attention to this part, because this is the moment the whole scheme hinges on. Tom allegedly told the production company that, as the son of the Queen consort, he personally had the authority to grant access to royal properties for commercial filming. He positioned himself as a gatekeeper, a fixer, a man with the keys to the kingdom. The production company, eager to film in one of the most iconic and photographically stunning royal residences on Earth, apparently never thought to pick up a phone and verify a single word of it with actual palace officials. Why would they? He is the Queen consort's son. Who would lie about something like that? He would. That is who. The project, according to insiders, was a high-end food and travel documentary series. The concept was glossy, ambitious, and frankly irresistible to streaming executives. Aristocratic estates, centuries-old culinary traditions, candlelit dining rooms filled with crystal and crest-edged china, and the crown jewel, the one location that would guarantee global press coverage and massive subscriber numbers, was Balmoral itself. Tom had reportedly already secured significant funding from streaming platforms and corporate sponsors, all of it predicated on one promise: exclusive, unprecedented access to the late Queen's most cherished private home. Pause for a second. Let that sink in. He had taken money, real money, hundreds of thousands of pounds, allegedly, in advance payments and coordination fees. All of it riding on a lie that he could deliver something he had absolutely no right to sell. And then, without warning, without announcement, without even the courtesy of a phone call, Princess Anne showed up. If you know anything about Princess Anne, you already know what happened next is going to be ugly. Anne is not the soft royal, she is not the smiling waver, the ribbon cutter, the gentle handshaker. Anne is the horse rider, the marine biologist, the woman who once talked down an armed kidnapper on a London street by telling him, and I am not exaggerating, not bloody likely. She is the hardest working royal in Britain, year after year, by every official count, and of every royal alive, she is the one with the deepest, most personal, most protective attachment to Balmoral. Her late mother loved that estate more than any other home she ever had. Anne considers herself its guardian, its conscience, its memory. So imagine her face, if you can, as she walked into the castle's historic dining room, the very room where her mother had taken tea thousands of times and found it transformed into a film set. Boom microphones dangling from the ceiling, a chef she had never seen plating food on her family's dishes, cameras on tripods aimed at the fireplace. Strangers, dozens of them, tramping through the halls in rubber-soled shoes. Staff who witnessed what happened next described Anne as, and I quote the reporting, absolutely furious and shaking with rage. Volcanic, incandescent. She did not raise her voice at first. She did not have to. She simply turned to the nearest producer and asked one cold, quiet question. Who authorized this? And when the answer came back, Tom Parker Bowles, it is said that every person in the room understood instantly that something had gone very, very wrong. Within the hour, she had cleared the building. Security intervened when protests were raised. Trucks were ordered off the estate. Equipment was packed up mid-shot. And then Anne made a phone call that would light the fuse on everything that followed. She called the king. Now, here is a detail that I think most people miss when they hear this story, and it matters enormously. Tom was not even there. He had sent his production team ahead while he handled other business in London, apparently so confident that his scheme would glide through unnoticed that he did not even bother to supervise it in person. That single decision, the decision to delegate rather than oversee, would turn out to be the catastrophic mistake of his life. Because by the time he found out what had happened, the damage was already done, the paper trail was already being pulled, and Princess Anne was already on the phone to the royal legal team. Let me tell you something about that phone call to King Charles, because the details matter. Charles, by every palace account, was blindsided, genuinely. He had given no permission. He had signed no authorization. This was, he insisted, the first he had heard of any filming project at any royal property involving his stepson. And here's the part that really stings. Charles was reportedly embarrassed, not angry at first, embarrassed, because the man at the center of the scandal was not a stranger, not a distant cousin, not some enterprising outsider. It was his wife's son, a member of his own household. And in that moment, the King of the United Kingdom had to sit down and quietly absorb the fact that someone inside his own family had allegedly been running a fraud scheme using the family name. But that is nothing compared to what comes next. Because when Anne's legal team began pulling on the thread, the whole sweater started to unravel. And what they found underneath was so much worse than one morning of unauthorized filming that it genuinely changed the nature of the case. Here is where it gets interesting. Pay very close attention to this next part, because it is the part most people get completely wrong. They think this was one bad decision, one opportunistic mistake, one file the cameras rolled before they should have. It was not even close. What investigators uncovered was a pattern. A long, deliberate, meticulously maintained pattern of behavior that stretched back months, possibly years. Contracts, multiple contracts, with production companies, with equipment rental firms, with catering services, with hospitality coordinators, all of them signed, all of them predicated on the same fundamental lie that Tom Parker Bowles had the authority to grant commercial access to royal estates. And the estates were not limited to Balmoral. Sandringham, the royal family's Norfolk retreat, the place where Christmas happens every year, where the late Queen delivered her final Christmas broadcast. Tom had allegedly pitched access to Sandringham too, and Windsor Castle, the oldest continuously inhabited royal residence on Earth, home to nearly 1,000 years of British history. He had, according to the investigators, been pitching that one as well. Pitching himself quietly, privately, to a small circle of wealthy producers as the royal family's unofficial liaison for commercial opportunities. A role that, and I cannot stress this enough, absolutely did not exist. A role he had zero authority to invent, let alone fill. The financial scale is what stopped investigators in their tracks. We are not talking about a few free meals or some favors traded between friends. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds paid directly to Tom personally for access fees, coordination fees, and location consulting fees, all of it based on his fraudulent representations. Money had already moved. Bank accounts had already been credited. Contracts had already been countersigned. The damage, by the time Anne pulled back the curtain, was deep. Very deep. And then came the forgeries. I want you to really feel the weight of this next piece, because this is the moment the story stops being an embarrassing royal mishap and becomes something much darker. The legal team discovered that Tom had allegedly forged documents that appeared to grant him official palace authorization. Documents that carried the look, the language, and in some cases, the letterhead of royal communication. He had allegedly shown these to production companies and contractors. He had allegedly used them to validate his authority, and creating fake royal authorization documents is not a gray area. It is not a misunderstanding. It is not a bit of light social climbing. In British law, that is potentially criminal fraud. Full stop. When Tom was finally confronted with the evidence, his first instinct, according to sources, was to claim confusion. A misunderstanding. He had simply believed, he said, that his position as the Queen Consort's son came with certain privileges regarding royal property access. His lawyers tried to frame it all as a miscommunication, a matter of style rather than substance. But the paper trail was too long, too detailed, too deliberate. You do not accidentally forge a letterhead. You do not accidentally sign multiple contracts with multiple companies across multiple months. You do not accidentally take advance payments into a personal bank account. The defense, as it was initially floated, simply could not hold weight under the evidence. And King Charles was now trapped. Genuinely trapped. His stepson stood accused of what looked increasingly like fraud involving royal property. Charles's first instinct, according to multiple palace sources, was to handle it quietly, internally, within the family. Keep the circle tight. Let the lawyers negotiate a resolution. Protect the institution. Anne refused. And here is where, if you have not already, you start to understand why Princess Anne is the person she is. Because Anne looked at her brother, looked at the evidence, and said, in effect, no, not this time. She argued, and she argued forcefully, that allowing royal family members or their relatives to commit fraud without accountability would set a precedent so dangerous that it would rot the monarchy from the inside. If Tom could do this and walk away, what would stop the next person? What would stop the one after that? What would stop the slow, quiet, corrosive understanding that the rules apply to everyone except the people closest to the crown? She demanded that the matter go through proper legal channels. Even if it meant public embarrassment, even if it meant headlines, even if it meant, and this is the part I want you to sit with, embarrassment for her own family. That is who Anne is. And that is why, even now, the story is still unfolding. But hold on, because Balmoral was just the surface. And what Anne's investigators found next, when they started looking at Tom's business history as a whole, turned a single scandal into something much larger, something systemic, something that had been happening for years right under everyone's noses. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how a food critic, one of hundreds in Britain, gets booked onto premium television programs, signs multi-book publishing deals, and commands 5-figure appearance fees at corporate events? Talent? Sure. Charm? Maybe. But if you really squeeze the lemon, what you get is the same answer every time. The royal connection. His mother is the queen consort. And according to the investigation, Tom had been weaponizing that connection for years as a business strategy. Here is what the investigators documented, and it is not pretty. Restaurant owners came forward with stories that frankly should embarrass anyone who hears them. Tom allegedly requested special treatment. Free meals, preferential reservations, tables at restaurants where tables simply do not exist on short notice, and some of these restaurateurs described feeling pressured to accommodate him. Not because of explicit threats. Tom is far too careful for anything that crude, but because of the unspoken understanding that the queen consort's son having a bad experience at your restaurant could mean, potentially, negative royal attention, treat him well, or face the ripples. That is an unspoken threat. A very British kind of pressure, but a pressure nonetheless. Then there were the corporate sponsorships, brands paying Tom premium, above market rates for endorsements and appearances. And ask yourself, honestly, were they paying for his palate? Were they paying for his expertise on braised short ribs and vintage Burgundy? Or were they paying for the photograph, the one that would inevitably appear in their marketing materials, of Tom at a royal event, or standing next to his mother, or just close enough to the palace that the implied endorsement did the heavy lifting? That implied royal approval was never authorized, it was never officially granted. But it was absolutely, ruthlessly exploited. Pay attention to this next part, because it is the part most people get completely wrong. They assume the publishing deals were about the cookbooks, about the recipes, about the writing. They were not. The contracts, according to the investigation, specifically referenced his royal connections. Publishers were not buying Tom, the food writer. They were buying Tom, the queen consort's son, with all the press tours and chat show bookings and tabloid coverage that comes attached. The advances he received, the royalty terms he negotiated, they far exceeded what a food critic of his actual standing in the industry would normally command. That gap, that premium, has a name. It is called the royal markup, and Tom had been cashing it for years. Television operated the same way. Producers booked Tom not because he was the finest food expert they could find. They had plenty of those. They booked him because he came with a built-in audience hook. Every episode featuring Tom could be marketed on the royal angle. The queen consort's son visits a vineyard. The queen consort's son tastes truffles in Piedmont. The queen consort's son tries Yorkshire pudding in an old coaching inn. You could feel the pitch meeting without even being in the room. And the viewers, curious, fascinated, already emotionally invested in the royal story, tuned in. Everyone won, except, arguably, honesty. Here is the line that Tom crossed, the one that separated normal royal-adjacent hustle from something more legally dangerous. Business partners were led to believe consistently over years that Tom's influence inside the palace was greater than it actually was, that he could pick up a phone and make things happen, that he had access, and access is the currency of the rich and powerful. The Balmoral scheme was not a lightning strike. It was the logical endpoint of a pattern of slow, steady misrepresentation. The lie just finally grew large enough to break the surface. Event organizers described paying him appearance fees that, for a food critic, seemed wildly disproportionate. 5 figures, for relatively simple speaking engagements, dinners, panel appearances, book club visits, and they paid it. They kept paying it. Because the ticket buyers came for the royal connection, Tom had priced himself based not on his market value, but on his proximity to the throne. And the market, incredibly, bore it. The most uncomfortable revelation, and this is the one that made palace aides wince, involved royal letterhead and royal communication channels. Nothing technically illegal, but the use of them gave every recipient the unmistakable impression that Tom's ventures carried some form of official palace blessing. Emails that drifted through channels associated with royal staff, correspondence that touched, even lightly, on addresses and references that implied a level of institutional backing Tom simply did not have. People reading those communications made assumptions, and Tom, according to investigators, let those assumptions sit exactly where they were, unchallenged and useful. Now, let me bring you into something you might not have considered. Tom's social media. Go look. I am not going to tell you to stop the video, but you can see for yourself if you want. Every photo with his mother, every image taken at or near a royal residence, every carefully staged appearance at an event connected to the crown, curated, calibrated, deployed, not for personal reasons, for commercial ones, because each post, each image, each tag was another brick in the wall of his brand. The line between family member and royal profiteer had been blurred so thoroughly that, by the end, even close observers had difficulty telling which was which. And then we get to the staff. This is where, honestly, my sympathy starts to run out completely. Palace staff at royal residences reportedly came forward with complaints about Tom's behavior during family visits, dismissive treatment, unreasonable demands, a habit, as one description put it, of behaving as if he were an actual member of the royal family rather than a relative of one. You need to understand what that means in the context of the British household staff tradition. These are people who serve with enormous loyalty, who often work for decades, who have seen every kind of royal personality pass through the corridors. For them to speak up even privately about someone's conduct is a signal that something has crossed a deeply understood internal line. And Tom, apparently, kept crossing it. Princess Anne, I am told, was absolutely disgusted when these reports reached her. And here is the quiet human element of this story that I think matters. Anne has her own children, Zara, Peter. Both of them have built lives and careers entirely on their own terms. They do not use royal titles. They do not trade on their mother's position. They compete, they work, they fail, they succeed, they do it in public, and they do it without pulling any royal strings. They are, in a very real sense, the living counterexample to everything Tom has allegedly been doing. For Anne, watching her sister-in-law's son exploit access that her own children scrupulously refused to touch was not just a policy question, it was personal. Financial forensics sharpened the picture. Over the years, Tom had allegedly earned millions of pounds through ventures heavily, in some cases entirely, dependent on his royal connection. Book sales, television deals, restaurant consulting, corporate sponsorships, speaking fees, brand partnerships, stack it all up, and a portrait emerges. This was not a career with royal garnish. This was a royal career with a food writer costume on top. And then the tax implications raised their head. Because if some portion of this income had been generated through misrepresentations of authority over royal property or royal endorsements, then aspects of it could potentially be viewed as proceeds of fraud. That triggers review, that triggers audit, that triggers the kind of slow, methodical, paperwork-driven scrutiny that ends careers and sometimes ends in handcuffs. The investigators were not going to miss that angle, and they did not. What started as a single morning of unauthorized filming had now expanded in every direction into a full-scale accountability reckoning. But wait, because here is the part I promised you. The twist, the moment I said would make your jaw hit the floor. What Camilla, the Queen Consort herself, allegedly did next, in an attempt to protect her son, is what transformed this from a scandal into a crisis. Stay with me. This is the turn. This is where the story takes an absolutely insane turn. Because when Queen Camilla learned about the depth of the investigation and about Princess Anne's absolute refusal to let it be quietly buried, she allegedly launched a campaign of her own. Not to get to the truth, not to discipline her son, not to support the Princess Royal in her pursuit of accountability. No. According to palace insiders, Camilla launched a campaign to protect Tom and contain the damage. And the methods she allegedly used would fracture the royal family in ways that may never fully heal. Her first move, I am told, was aimed squarely at the king himself. She allegedly tried to convince King Charles to quash the investigation outright. Her argument, polished and strategically delivered, was that prosecuting her son would trigger a media firestorm far more damaging to the monarchy than the underlying offense. She positioned herself as the institution's protector, the reasonable voice, the adult in the room, but Anne, from where she stood, saw something else entirely. She saw a mother trying to shield a fraudster because the fraudster happened to be her child, and Anne was not buying it. The confrontation that followed is the one every palace reporter in London would kill to have a transcript of. Multiple staff members reportedly heard raised voices carrying through the walls of a private meeting room. Two women, both accustomed to getting their way, both convinced they were right, both unwilling to back down. Anne insisted that no one, regardless of family connection, could be above the law. Camilla insisted that family loyalty and institutional discretion had to take precedence, two different visions of what the monarchy is supposed to be, and they could not coexist in the same room. Here is where the details become genuinely startling. Camilla allegedly offered to personally reimburse, out of her own funds, every person and company who had paid money to Tom based on his fraudulent promises. Hundreds of thousands of pounds. She was prepared to write the check. She wanted, more than anything, for the financial damage to simply disappear. For the ledger to be clean again without the indignity of a court, Anne rejected it flat. Because, she argued, that was not accountability. That was buying your way out. That was exactly the two-tiered system the institution could not be seen to tolerate. Camilla's next move, and I want you to feel the audacity of this, was reportedly to approach the royal legal team directly, apparently hoping to instruct them to drop the investigation. Stop and think about what that means. A queen consort attempting to override a princess royal's instructions to royal lawyers regarding a case involving potential fraud on crown property. There is no clear constitutional precedent for that. None. The lawyers, caught in a pincer of competing royal authority, ultimately reached the only defensible decision. They continued the investigation. Because their duty, in the end, was to the interests of the crown estate, not to any single royal personality. Then came the attempted mediation. Camilla pushed, and pushed hard, for a private face-to-face meeting between Tom and Anne. A family sit-down, a quiet reconciliation. Tea and an apology, perhaps a handshake, and the whole matter folded back into the discreet machinery of royal life. Anne refused. She made it, by all accounts, crystal clear. This was not a family dispute to be resolved over Darjeeling. This was a legal matter to be resolved in a courtroom, full stop. And then the media campaign started. This is the part I find personally distasteful, and I want to tell you about it because it tells you a lot about how the modern monarchy actually operates behind the curtain. Certain royal reporters began receiving anonymous tips, very carefully worded tips. Tips that suggested Anne was overreacting to a minor misunderstanding. Tips that suggested Anne was using the situation to attack Camilla out of long-standing personal animosity. Tips that painted the Princess Royal as jealous, vindictive, emotionally compromised. A woman pursuing a vendetta dressed up as a legal principal. These tips, investigative reporters later concluded, bore the fingerprints of an organized briefing campaign. And when those same reporters dug into the actual evidence, into the contracts and the forged documents and the financial transfers, the smear fell apart in their hands. But the attempt, the mere attempt, that alone told you everything you needed to know about how seriously this cover-up was being pursued. Camilla allegedly went further. She reportedly tried to limit Anne's access to certain royal properties and functions, seemingly as retaliation for her refusal to back down. Petty, small, utterly unbecoming. And it had the opposite of its intended effect. It hardened Anne's position. It drew sympathetic attention from within the household. And it revealed, in a way no briefing could spin, that the queen consort was prioritizing her own son over the integrity of the institution she had married into. King Charles, by every account I have seen, was now functionally paralyzed. Camilla was allegedly giving him marital ultimatums: support her and Tom, or face real consequences in their relationship. Anne was demanding he put institutional integrity first. Charles tried to stay neutral, tried to be a referee rather than a participant. And the neutrality, as it always does in moments like this, pleased no one. Camilla saw it as weakness, Anne saw it as complicity. The British press saw a king who could not, or would not, choose. And that image, a hesitant monarch caught in his own family's crossfire, is the kind of image that does long-term damage to a crown. The cover-up then reached a line that, I think, is the one line everyone watching this story agrees should not have been crossed. Staff, household staff, the people who actually witnessed things. Camilla allegedly suggested, through various channels, that loyalty to the royal family meant protecting Tom rather than providing truthful testimony to investigators. Some staff reportedly felt pressured to minimize what they had seen, to claim they had not witnessed what they had, in fact, witnessed, that is, witness interference. That is, potentially, obstruction of justice, and in most legal systems, it is taken extremely seriously. Several longtime royal employees, feeling cornered, privately approached Princess Anne. They described the pressure, they described the suggestions, and they asked, essentially, for her protection so that they could tell the truth. Anne was incandescent. By every account I have seen, this was the moment her cold, professional resolve turned into something much hotter. Because the Queen Consort, in attempting to shield her son, had now allegedly corrupted the testimony of household workers. That is a step beyond protecting family. That is a step into serious misconduct. And Anne's legal team made sure every note of it was documented. Financial records added fuel. In the months following the initial Balmoral discovery, Camilla had allegedly transferred significant sums of money to Tom. On its face, a mother helping her son. Between the lines, potentially an attempt to help him repay some of the fraudulent fees he had collected, thereby helping him conceal the proceeds of the original fraud. Anne's legal team did not see those transfers as motherly generosity. They saw them as potentially relevant transactions, and they added them, quietly and methodically, to the growing file. The palace press office, caught in the middle, fractured. Camilla wanted a lockdown. No acknowledgement, no comment. Silence as policy. Anne wanted transparency, honesty. A clear statement to the British public that the institution was taking the matter seriously. The cover-up attempt, in every measurable way, made the situation dramatically worse. What could have been handled as one man's individual misconduct became, almost overnight, a story about a queen consort attempting to obstruct a legitimate investigation and elevate her family above the law. The stain, which had begun on Tom alone, now covered Camilla's judgment, her priorities, and her relationship with the rest of the royal family. But even Camilla's interference was not the final obstacle Anne faced, because the royal legal system itself, with all its antique complications and constitutional gray zones, was about to throw up barriers that threatened to let Tom escape entirely. And that is where this story enters its most difficult chapter. Stay with me. The first and largest problem was jurisdictional. Who exactly had the authority to prosecute misconduct involving royal property? The Crown Estate, as an institutional entity, has its own legal framework, which overlaps with but does not perfectly align with standard British common law. Tom's lawyers, and they were among the most expensive and aggressive in Britain, pounced on this immediately. They argued, in motion after motion, that standard courts lacked jurisdiction over matters involving royal residences and royal family members. They argued that any proceeding against Tom needed to be handled internally, through channels that were, conveniently, much harder to compel and much easier to stall. Anne's legal team fired back with an elegant counter. Tom's alleged fraud, they argued, had not occurred within the royal household itself. It had occurred in ordinary commercial transactions governed by ordinary contract law. He had signed ordinary contracts with ordinary production companies. He had accepted ordinary payments into an ordinary bank account. He had allegedly forged documents in the ordinary course of commercial fraud. The fact that royal property sat at the center of the scheme did not magically lift the scheme itself into some untouchable legal realm. Fraud is fraud, forgery is forgery, breach of contract is breach of contract. And British courts, they argued, had every right to hear it. The jurisdictional dispute alone consumed months. Every hearing was contested, Every motion generated a counter-motion. And all the while, Tom's lawyers were doing exactly what expensive lawyers are paid to do. They were running out the clock. Delay, exhaustion, cost. Those are the weapons of the rich defendant. And they were being wielded with precision. The second problem was standing. Could Princess Anne, as an individual royal, initiate legal proceedings on her own initiative regarding Crown estate property when the monarch, her brother, had not explicitly authorized her to do so? The constitutional answer was genuinely unclear. There was no precedent. Nothing quite like this had ever happened in modern British history. Tom's lawyers seized on the ambiguity and argued, to anyone who would listen, that the entire proceeding lacked legitimacy at the root. Charles's refusal to take a clear public position on the matter made the standing question even harder to resolve. He was, his lawyers argued, neutral. But neutrality from a monarch, in a matter of this magnitude, is itself a kind of action, and it was an action that, intentionally or not, helped Tom. The third problem was the defense strategy itself. Tom's lawyers pivoted early and aggressively to attacking Anne's motives. They argued, publicly and privately, that the Princess Royal was not pursuing this case out of any principled concern for crown property. She was pursuing it, they insinuated, because of a personal animosity toward Camilla that had festered for years. They painted Anne as jealous, vindictive, weaponizing the law in a family power struggle. It was an ugly tactic, a deeply unfair one, but it was designed to create just enough public confusion about her motives that the underlying case became harder to prosecute cleanly. And for a while, honestly, it worked. Discovery became an outright battlefield. Tom's legal team demanded extensive documentation about how royal properties had historically been used. They requested decades of records, hunting for any precedent, however obscure, of informal access arrangements or family members facilitating property use without formal protocols. Their aim was clear: establish that Tom's conduct, while perhaps improper, was not unprecedented, create a context in which his actions looked, at worst, like a clumsy extension of existing customs. Anne's team fought those requests hard, calling them fishing expeditions designed to extract private royal information unrelated to the actual misconduct at issue. Battles over discovery, over what documents had to be produced, what testimony had to be given, consumed months, and they generated legal fees of staggering size on both sides. Witnesses wavered. Some palace staff, fearing retaliation from one faction or another, had to be subpoenaed. Others developed the kind of convenient memory problems that everyone in the room understood perfectly. I do not recall, I cannot remember, I was not present. These are the phrases of a witness under pressure, and the pressure, applied from multiple directions, was intense. The media turned the whole thing into theater. Every court filing leaked. Every piece of evidence, no matter how technical, ended up on a front page. Tom's lawyers used the media attention strategically. They spun each development into a victim narrative. They leaked selectively. They did exactly what high-end defense teams do when they cannot win on the facts. They tried to win on perception. Constitutional experts piled in publicly, and not one of them agreed with another. Different legal scholars reached wildly different conclusions about whether Anne had standing, whether the Crown estate framework applied, whether a criminal track parallel to the civil lawsuit was even possible. The public debate revealed something the monarchy had successfully hidden for decades. Its internal legal machinery was, in some places, astonishingly antiquated. Rules written for a world of deference and discretion were creaking under the weight of a modern fraud case with real money and real victims. Criminal charges were also in play, moving quietly on a parallel track. Prosecutors independent of Anne's civil action were reportedly considering whether the alleged forged authorization documents amounted to criminal fraud. They were examining whether certain financial transfers raised money laundering questions. They were weighing whether the pattern of misrepresentation crossed lines that the criminal code cared about. But prosecutors as a class are cautious. Prosecuting the Queen Consort's son without royal family support would be institutionally a nightmare, and so they moved slowly, deliberately. Almost invisibly. Anne, meanwhile, found herself fighting a battle on two fronts. Tom's lawyers were one front, the palace itself was another. The machinery of the institution, the aides and advisors and private secretaries and household counselors wanted the matter handled quietly, internally, with minimal public exposure. The unwritten rules of royal scandal management have always been the same: contain, control, cool. Anne's insistence on formal legal proceedings violated every one of those rules, and it cost her. Allies she had assumed she could count on became suddenly unavailable. Doors that had always been open became politely closed. The cost of doing the right thing, she was learning in real time, was higher than she had anticipated. The financial cost alone was staggering: hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal fees, expert witnesses, forensic accountants, investigators. Anne, significantly, was reportedly paying her own costs out of her own funds rather than using royal money. It was a deliberate choice. She wanted her independence and her moral authority both to be unimpeachable. Tom's side, by contrast, was reportedly being funded by Camilla, though the exact sources of that funding were murky. Settlement offers flowed in, again and again. Tom would apologize, Tom would reimburse parties, Tom would agree to restrictions on future conduct. Tom would do, essentially, anything short of facing a public trial and a formal judgment on the record. Anne rejected every single one. Her position never moved. There had to be, for this to mean anything, a real consequence on a real record. Otherwise, the lesson of the case would be, for every future royal relative watching, that you could do what Tom did and walk away clean if you had the right mother. The cost to the family itself was devastating. Christmas gatherings became unbearably tense. Multiple family members reportedly refused to attend events where certain other family members would be present. The traditional united front, the royals always project, the smiling balcony waves, the coordinated tours, the seamless public choreography, cracked. You could see the strain in the official photographs if you knew where to look. And the British public, which reads those photographs like scripture, knew exactly where to look. Anne's own health reportedly suffered. Friends quietly worried. The determination that had carried her through decades of public service was being tested now by a fight against her own sister-in-law inside her own family over her own mother's most beloved home. But she did not bend. She did not negotiate. She did not compromise. She saw the case as a matter of fundamental principle, and she carried it, week after week, despite the personal cost. And perhaps that is the most important thing this entire affair has revealed. Because what the Balmoral case has exposed, in a way nothing else in recent memory has, is that the traditional systems the royal family has used to manage internal problems are no longer remotely adequate for modern accountability. The old methods, quiet internal discipline, informal consequences, discreet reputation management, those methods were designed for a world where the press was deferential, the public was compliant, and internal transgressions rarely involved real money or real victims. That world is gone. And the Tom Parker Bowles affair is perhaps the loudest proof of it yet. Now I want to bring you back to the woman at the center of all this. Because for all the legal complexity, for all the constitutional gray areas, for all the media spin and the family infighting, there is really only one question that matters in the end. And it is a question for you. Was Princess Anne right? Right to refuse the quiet settlement? Right to drag her own family through months of public agony? Right to insist, even at enormous personal cost, that the rules apply to everyone, including the Queen Consort's son? Or should this have been handled privately, discreetly, the way royal scandals have always been handled, preserving the illusion of a unified family at the expense of a single hard truth? You decide. Because the truth is, there is no clean answer. There is only the answer you live with. Here is what I think you should take away from all of this, if you take anything at all. When institutions avoid accountability for the people closest to power, they do not stay strong. They rot, slowly, invisibly, from the inside. And the only thing that ever stops that rot is someone inside the institution, Someone with real standing and real courage who is willing to say, "Not this time. Not on my watch. Not in my mother's house." Anne said it, loud enough for the whole kingdom to hear. Now, I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, was Princess Anne right to take Tom Parker Bowles to court? Was Camilla right to defend her son? Was King Charles right to stay neutral, or did his neutrality, in the end, become its own form of failure? I read these comments. I genuinely want to know where you land. If this story pulled you in, if it gave you something to think about, do me two quick favors. Hit that like button because it genuinely helps this channel survive. Hit subscribe because I have more stories like this one coming, stories from inside the palace walls that almost nobody else is willing to tell in full. And then click the next video already waiting for you on your screen because I promise you, after what you just heard, you are going to want to see what comes next. Stay with me. There is so much more where this came from.